Hey guys, Chris from the Ultimate Recycler. I'm at the farm. I've been filming for the last few days whilst doing the final cleanup, but this particular video won't follow straight after the other ones. This is my last trip here, and I thought this video, which incidentally is probably part 76, I think, I thought this one probably just should, rather than show loading and show what I've been doing, I've pretty well finished everything. I'm taking off home in the morning, but just this evening and maybe in the morning before I go, I might just walk around the place, just relive a few memories, have a look around for the last time, and maybe I'll find some photos when I get round to editing this footage and show you perhaps some of my memories and what it looks like now. And I don't know, I just thought I'd do some sort of conclusion. I didn't want to get all sentimental and emotional. I know I've had a lot of comments about that, and yes, it is a major thing. It's the end of an era. I grew up here. I'm 60 this year, actually turning 61 later this year. My mum and dad were here for 61 years, and they moved out here when my grandparents moved into town. So my grandparents were here for a little bit before that. So it's been a family farm for a long time. My brother and I grew up here. All of our close family, cousins and everyone always came here for Christmas. So it really is I've caught myself saying it's home a few times in the last few videos. So when I'm home next. Now I haven't lived here for about 40 years, and I haven't lived in the area for about 25. But, you know, mum and dad were here and it was always home. So let's have a walk around, have a bit more of a look of how it is now. We'll probably touch on some just things as they come to mind. And as I said, if I can find some photos, I'll put them up and you can have a look at those. So I might just start by walking down the lane to where the machinery graveyard was. It's quite windy out, so hopefully it doesn't muck up the audio. But the sun's just about to go down, which is kind of symbolic, I reckon. And we'll just have a walk around and check out some things. Now, the paddocks here go down to the railway line along that tree line in the distance. And there were 3 separate paddocks here, but Ross has taken out the fences to make one big paddock, which is what farmers do these days. They have much bigger machinery. My grandfather would have worked these paddocks with horses back in the early days, and a lot has certainly changed since then. This laneway ended up being a machinery graveyard, and we filmed all the stuff going for scrap. So it's pretty neat and organised there. Ross will no doubt tidy up the rest of it, and he's running some sheep here. But the paddocks are pretty desolate at the moment because it's the middle of summer, but that's what this country looks like this time of the year. We haven't had any serious rain for quite a while, and of course the sheep eat anything that's remotely green, or even probably not. So yeah, there's not much growth in the paddocks at all. So we're around the south side of the house at the moment, and it's a very old farmhouse. Part of it was actually put here, I think in the about 1890, and then another part of the house was moved up against it around about 1900. So it's a very early house site. And I wonder what's going to happen to it in the future. I mean, Ross isn't sure what he's going to do with the house. I would imagine eventually it will probably be, well, it'll probably fall down if no one does maintenance on it. It's a great spot for a house though. So I would imagine eventually a nice modern house is going to be here and the garden will be revamped. He did say he was going to keep the palm trees, which is great, and some of the other nicer big trees in the front. So it's a good spot for a house, but maybe that'll never happen. You know, sometimes you see all around the countryside, you see paddocks where there's just a couple of peppercorn trees or there's a couple of sugar gums. And that indicates a site that was a farm, that was a happy home where kids grew up and a family ran a farming business. And things change. Time marches on. Houses become not required. Perhaps there's a fire. Sometimes you just see chimneys. But all around the countryside you see sites that used to be farms. Hopefully this one still will be, but I don't imagine the house is going to stay here for much longer. It's just a bit far gone. So yeah, look, another nice sunset. We get a lot of beautiful sunsets here, particularly nice when you have stormy weather. But we're looking west now. We're on a slight rise. It's actually a really good spot for a house, and you probably can't quite make them out, or maybe you can. there are clouds on the horizon, but there's also a line of mountains, which is the Grampians. So it's a beautiful view from here, and it is really good cropping land. And of course, sheep mainly, some cattle, and then it heads off to the railway line in that direction. That's the east, and out the other side of the house to the north you have the township of Matoa, which is only around about, I think it's less than 1,000 people now. So it's a small rural town, really just supports the farming industry. So we walk around. This is the front paddock, and again, these used to be separate paddocks, but all the fences have been taken out. There's a stand of bull oaks down the front and some sugar gums along the road. There's a dam down there where we as kids used to ride our bikes over the dam banks all the time. And I believe there were some tennis courts there. I don't ever remember them. I think back in the early days there were tennis courts down along the road there. But yeah, geez, it's dusty out here. We really need some rain to freshen things up. So that's the direction of the town over there. I don't know, you might be able to see, I can see it through the trees. There's the water tower. Let me zoom in and see if it helps. Yeah, between those two trees right in the middle, that's the water tower next to the lake in town. So not far from the town. And if we missed the bus as kids, we'd ride our bikes down the driveway. If we missed the bus, we could actually, and I think we did on a couple of times, continue riding our bikes into school. So it's pretty handy. We're close to town. The only reason we were actually able to catch the bus was that there was hardly any people on it, so they were fine. If the bus was full, we would have not qualified. All right, so there's not much out here, is there? Pretty desolate at the moment. And yet in winter, or certainly spring, this can look amazingly green and lush and lots of big crops. Just depends on the year, really. Okay, from the paddocks, we're back to the driveway and the barn that my dad and my grandfather built, and they've put it up on sewer pipes in an effort to keep the mice out of the seed wheat, and that was a common practice back then, and I believe it worked very well. The barn door was painted by my brother Greg a long time ago in Richmond Tigers colours. Well and truly faded. It's obviously copped the morning sun for many years. The barn, I can always remember as a kid, it was always full of seed wheat, bags and bags full of wheat, mostly the Hessian bags in the earlier days, and then also bags of superphosphate. And at one stage we had a table tennis table set up in here, I can remember, and I think there might have even been the odd celebration. Maybe my brother Greg's 18th birthday might have been in here. I have a feeling I brought a few college mates over. So the barn has served a few functions over the years. Of course, it gets used as storage, but most of its working life, it had rows and rows and rows of bags of wheat and super. And when you were sowing, when you were cropping, it's got a platform out the front. You'd back the truck up to the platform and put a ramp across it, and with a trolley you'd wheel all the bags up onto the truck and then take them out to the paddock where you were sowing and fill the combine, or seeder I guess you'd call it, depends where you're from. And you would then sow all the crops. And then we can look down past the power pole there. I'm not sure if we'll be able to zoom in, but you can see the lines up and down the paddock of where the crops were sown. Of course, much different machinery now to what I remember. They were towing an old seeder behind an old tractor, and you had to fill the hoppers with bags. It was all manual back then. This area here used to be chook yards and sheep yards. Well, it's sheep yards now, of course, again, as you can see, but Ross has set all those up. It had old timber sheep yards. Mum used to have a lot of chooks. I believe Dad had pigs in the early days. I don't remember them, but I think back in the 60s he had a few pigs. So that area was always either chooks or some sort of livestock over there. The big silos, of course, are more recent. Back in the earlier days, you didn't really store grain on farm at all. You basically, well, in the really early days, you actually took bags of wheat in and they stacked the bags at the railway sidings. And then, of course, we had bulk tops on the old trucks, and we used to take it in there. But I think in the early days, they really didn't have on-farm storage like they do now. Walking around to these other sheds, This shed in the early days, I believe, was stables. Back in my grandfather's day, I think he had Clydesdale horses and they were stabled here. Then in later times it just became a machinery shed. It was always known as the feed shed, and this is where all the drums of grain and whatnot were. I can remember once having one of our big bulls come in. I think I'd left the gate open or someone had, and he had his head in a drum munching away on crushed wheat, which is, they absolutely love it, but it's not good for their gut. And I think one other time some cows got in because someone may have left the gate open, not looking at anyone. And I think I got into a bit of trouble about that. And because if the cows eat a lot of crushed wheat, they can have bloat and you can actually lose them. But I was trying to get a bull out of here, and he was such a big, I don't know what he would have weighed. He was enormous. He was friendly. He wouldn't harm you. But I think I remember breaking a piece of wood over his head, just trying to get him to get his head out of one of these drums. I don't think I did any harm to him. In fact, he probably just ignored me. And I actually have a memory too of him moving. He basically did a U-ey and turned around, and his tail or back end hit one of the drums. A full drum of wheat that I could barely move, and I would struggle now, and it just flew across the shed. So he was a big, powerful beast. But yeah, that's one of my memories of this shed. Also, I did up an old V8 engine back in my late teens, and I'm pretty sure that chain that's up there is still the chain I used to pull the engine out of the car. I might actually have a photo of that, and that was in this shed. In the milking shed, or the cow shed, Dad used to milk about 6 cows every morning and every night by hand. And even when I went to school, I did milk 1 or 2. Not for long, but it was one of my jobs at one stage. It's quite dark in here now. So there's the old bales there where the cows came in and munched on their crushed wheat, and you'd milk them by hand. So can we even see? It's very hard to see here. So yeah, this was the milking shed. We won't dilly-dally in here, it's too dark. And this was the shearing shed, which Ross has now got some of his stuff in here. And I did have a car in here at one stage. And I think we also played table tennis in this shed at one stage. So not much of a table tennis stadium, but it did the job. Lots of memories of riding bikes around the yard, and all the dogs we had over the years. And we had a pet sheep here at one stage. I can remember, where's the gate? Over there. So before the carport was here, I can remember this yard being quite open, and there was just a chain wire fence across there separating the house yard from the farmyard. And we had a pet sheep called Caesar, and he used to chase you. And we were only young and we were quite scared of him. And he was over there where the chook shed was one time, and I was out in the yard about where I am now, and Mum and Dad had said to me, if you pretend you're not scared, if you don't run, he will leave you alone. So I put on all the bravado I could, and I just walked very carefully back towards the farmhouse, the house yard, and I was aware of him watching me. And when I got within a distance where I reckon I could make it, I bolted. I ran as fast as I could from about here straight to where the gate was, and I could hear him coming. The moment I took off, he chased me, and I think I jumped the gate, and I reckon he ran straight into it with his head about a millisecond afterwards. So that's one of my memories of having a pet sheep. I think it was raised as a lamb and got a bit too cocky, and he had a real attitude. So yeah, that was one event I remember. But we had a lot of cousins come up for Christmas time. This yard was bikes galore. Dad used to fix up all the bikes and scooters, and all our cousins would ride around. We'd kick the footy out here, as most Aussie kids did. You'd have a kick of the footy. It was always, never lasted very long on the gravel. It was always pretty rough on the football. But and it was hurt if you went for a big mark and fell over. But yeah, lots of football, lots of cricket games. This shed was relatively new, because remember, as a kid, I don't think any of these sheds were here. And if I can find some old photos, I'll put them up. My first car was a VW Beetle, and we used to drive it down the paddocks, down to the railway line. The stubble in the paddocks is quite slippery, and it was quite fun getting out in the paddocks in a car and, you know, getting it going sideways. And I think you pick up some great driving skills when you grow up on a farm. I think probably I was driving by about 14 or so, and You couldn't go out in the roads, but you could run around the paddocks, and it was a good experience for later in life. And I got all my kids out in the paddocks when they were learning to drive, and purposely put the handbrake on and tried to get the car into a slide, because that's that way they experience what to do. So yeah, we had a lot of fun out in the paddocks, and of course a lot of work. I mean, I helped on the farm a lot. We did a lot of tractor work, harvesting, other things you're doing on a cropping property, a lot of carting of hay bales. So I was always pretty fit and active. Back into the house yard now, and this room here, actually where this room is, used to be a very old plywood caravan, a really early one. It would probably be worth a lot of money now if it was complete. It probably dated to the 40s or so, and it was parked here for many, many years. And my brother and I used to play in that, and it was full of old books and stuff. I remember, I think they were grandpa's, or maybe, I don't know, but we used to muck around in there and pretend we were camping, or maybe, I think we used to be removalists, and we'd put everything out and then we'd pack it all back in. I don't know what we were doing, but that was fun as young kids. As I got into my teenage years, Dad built this room here, and it became my hobby room, and I absolutely loved it. I spent so many hours out here. I think the lights still work. Yep, and this was my workshop. This was my electronics muck around room. I built myself an amplifier. I used to get out here and sort resistors into little matchboxes. I think I showed that on a video many years ago. I had storage cupboards for all parts, and there was a workbench along here. I even painted a hawk on the back of the door, being a Hawthorn supporter. And Kevin, if you're watching, I will ask Ross about that door, because I know Kevin said he'd love to have it. But yeah, I had an alarm buzzer set up. I wonder if the thing's still here. No, it's not. I had a little switch on the door so that if someone opened the door, it'd set off a buzzer. And I had a switch on the house, just beside the house door, and wiring coming up to here. So if Mum needed me, she could press the switch and it would set a buzzer off in here. And I would spend every night out here. I don't know what I did, tinkered, fixed things. I know I made an amplifier at one stage that was kind of successful. I used to put a lot of stuff apart. Well, hey, I'm still a scrapper. I used to buy TVs and things at auctions and bring them back here and pull them apart and sort out bits and pieces. It never used to come into the main workshop. This is the main workshop, or Dad's workshop. It's very dark in here now. Hang on, I'll turn some lights on. That's better. So you've all seen in this shed lights. It never used to be a big shed like this. This end was the original single car garage for the property. When Dad first moved out here, when Mum and Dad first moved out here, this area of the wall was your normal double door for a single car garage. And then it has been extended over the years, and Dad put that old roller door in that end at one stage. He did a lot of work in here in recent years. But the original little room here was, I think, a generator room. That's probably one of the original poles, you know. Probably dates back a long way. So there was, when Mum and Dad came out here, there was no electricity. I had a 32-volt generator that they had to start if they wanted power. I don't remember what it ran off. It might have been an old petrol Kero engine. And this was the generator room. Then, so I think it was a garage earlier, and then it became a generator room. I'm not too sure. But I know there was a generator here. Dad reconcreted the whole lot. Those cupboards came from the mechanics hall in town, where Dad was treasurer for about 40 years or something ridiculous. And he's turned it into, well, he had turned it into quite a nice workshop. Like every farmer, he was quite apt at fixing things himself. And you always need a good workshop to do that sort of stuff. Some of these shelving came from my old shop. I used to have a small engine shop in town. So that ended up out here. So yeah, this door was never here. But this was my electronics and muck around workshop that I spent a long time. I used to be out of here every night, and Mum would have to say, come on, it's late, you got school tomorrow. So yep, lots of memories of this little room. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with all this. I think Ross will keep some of the shedding, but he'll probably revamp it. But that's okay. I'll turn those other lights off later. Now, moving down towards the house. Initially, the house had a fence right around it. I think it was a picket fence originally. And I know Mum used to battle to keep dogs out of the house yard and out of her garden, but in the end they won, and it became a free-for-all. This area here was my brother Greg and I's cricket pitch, so fairly restrictive. So you used to bowl from where I am here, and the wicket was bricks. I don't know when the bricks were put down. Dad must have done that pretty early. And as I said earlier, I think the palm trees were much, much lower. We could swing off the branches when we were young. So the batting wicket here was around about here somewhere. I think there was a wall here before that path. And so this is where you would bat. And of course you were restricted. You couldn't really hit anything on the offside. You had to try and hook. But I think most of the time we were trying to hit straight up through the gap in the trees and out onto the lawn. But we played a lot of just muck around cricket here. Crazy. I think there was numerous fights. Of course, we didn't have the video review system that they have in cricket now, so who knows if we were really out or not. Sometimes it was just a case of wanting an argument, perhaps. So yeah, I remember lots of different dogs we had over the years. A few cats as well, but the farms always had dogs. They were never inside dogs, they were always outside farm dogs, but they were pets. A lot of them weren't that good with sheep anyway. Dad always had a few good sheep dogs, but most of the ones we had were just mongrel breeds that were great, great companions for us as kids, and we'd go mousing with them and they'd chase rabbits, that sort of stuff. So where the big sugar gum trees were, which is about where that fence is now, were the dog kennels. They had runs so that they had a short chain, but the chain was on a wire so that they could run back and forward. They had half tanks and things as kennels. And we always had to feed the dogs before we got fed. One of Mum's rules, I think, and that's very good. You've got to look after your animals. In later times, this became more garden, but when I was younger, this was actually, you had your big sugar gums there, but it was quite an expanse of grass out here. We had to mow quite regularly. But the garden certainly filled in around the house a lot over the years. In the early days, I don't remember it being anywhere near quite as involved. And of course, all the trees have grown. And yeah, as I mentioned, these sheds weren't here in the early days. It was really just a wire fence and the old garage over there, and that's where the caravan was. The old brick barbecue here. It's probably the heaviest barbecue ever known. Seriously, why would you use so many bricks for one barbecue? It's one solid piece, and I do remember that it was moved. Now, at one stage, when the garden shrubs and trees weren't so intrusive, and this was a nice lawn, the barbecue was over there. So around about where the bottom of that post is leaning against the tank, on an angle, with a nice lawn with square edges and a nice little shrub garden that side and one back that side. This tank, of course, wasn't there. And I do remember the day that Dad and Grandpa moved that barbecue from that spot across to this area, which obviously never used to have a veranda along this section. So once this was sort of filled in, I guess the theory was it'd be a nice spot to put the barbecue where there was some shelter, and it was rolled across to here on pipes, and I reckon that was a pretty good effort to move it. Didn't have to go far, but that thing is seriously heavy. So consequently it's staying there, and I don't know what's, in fact I think it's sinking on one side. It looks uneven. So I don't know what Ross plans to do with that, but it did cook beautiful sausages. Just a matter of shoving a heap of timber underneath and a big steel hot plate, and that's all you needed. But yep, I do remember the day it was moved. Back in this area was an underground tank. So it was quite deep. I can actually remember being down there one time cleaning it out, and I think it was about, I don't know, 18 feet or something. And now it has all been filled in because the top started, I think it had tree roots in it. It's no longer used for water. It was just alongside this path. And it was always a bit of a risk sort of sitting on top of it. It did have a tin sort of roof, but if you fell in, it was a long way in, and if it was empty, it was a long way down. It all got filled in with broken bricks and rubble and just some gravel on the top, and now the plants seem to be enjoying the good drainage. So yeah, that was the underground tank. And right where I'm standing here, there was an overhead tank. So there was a narrow path down here to the outdoor toilet, which is just down there. And there was a tank frame, and the tank was way up the top there. Well, you know, it was as high as the roof, and it was a big size tank. And I guess that gravity fed to the house. And for many years we would climb on that frame, and it was just, yeah, it was just a frame that was always there. I don't know when it was taken out, actually. And the little track to the toilet, well, we never used to have an indoor toilet, so this was the little narrow path down to the outside loo. And if it was pouring rain or if it's freezing cold, bad luck, you had to run down here. And sometimes running back when the cat was hiding in the bushes and would jump out at you from behind and grab onto your calf muscle. It was rather scary. You felt like some monster from the deep had reached out and grabbed you. So outdoor toilets, I guess a lot of people grew up with them, but we had one for a long, long time. I don't know when the first toilet was put inside. All right, it's getting a bit dark out here. We've missed seeing the final sunset. We saw it a bit before. I'll probably be up early in the morning, and we might do a bit more of a walk around before we go. It's still quite light out here, so let's walk down the paddock for a little bit. So ahead of us is, well, there's the big stick shed, the Matoa wheat silos. You can't quite see the stick shed, but look it up online. It's an amazing building to see. Emergency grain storage built in World War II. Let's zoom in, at least you can see it then. So there we go. I think it used to be called the Mama Inland Grain Receival Centre or something. I don't know what it's called now. But the stick shed's there. It's one of the biggest inland grain receival centres in Australia, I think, or certainly in Victoria. So anyway, that's where the stick shed is. Pretty good tourist destination nowadays. So over in the trees there and the sheds over there, that's Ross's farm. So you can see why he kind of wanted here. Right next door, it's essentially an extension of his own farmyard. And when I was a kid, I believe Mum tells me that I used to wander, and I managed to slip away numerous times. And I think Mum said that she would ring Ross's mum and get her to look out for me, and I may have turned up over there one time. I don't know, I don't remember it, but apparently I used to just go for walkabouts. So I'm walking down this paddock now. I believe one time we walked down to the railway line. I don't know how old I was, but I know that we hadn't told anyone where we were going, and we just went off for a walk and ended up down at the railway line. And yeah, people weren't happy, and the punishment, I do remember the punishment. There was a circus coming to town and we weren't allowed to go. So I don't know if that cured me from wandering or not, but I do remember the punishment. So it must have made an impact. But yeah, we're out in the paddock now. It's looks like it was a pretty good crop. The stubble's quite thick. And we do get a bit of a sunset over the farm. Doesn't quite look the same silhouette without the great big sugar gums there. But it's nice to see a straight power pole, I've got to say. Another time I was apparently missing for a long time, and Mum had rang all the neighbours and no one knew where I was. And I was out near the veggie garden, and I don't know what I was doing. I must have been digging a little hole or something. Maybe that started the bottle collecting bug in me. But I do remember people not being very happy with me that time too. Beautiful evening out here. The wind's died down now. Really nice. So these are the dry, flat Wimmera plains. Look at the sheep tracks. This is what the sheep do. They walk single file behind each other, and they create these really cool tracks. It looks good from the air. Anyone who gets drone footage, you can always see the sheep tracks. They're amazing. And they actually walk it. They walk it down pretty deep. They make quite a rut. So they've obviously come up to the lane, perhaps in the evening, and wander down the paddock looking for something to eat during the day. Really nice out here. I'm going to miss this serenity. Don't they say, how's the serenity? You don't get this peace and quiet, even in a lot of other farming areas. Something about cropping land where it's a long way from the neighbour and a long way from a road, And you're just hearing the crickets and the crunching of stubble as you walk through it. Beautiful country. And these are going to turn up everywhere. Yep, it's not a mushroom, it's a golf ball. Dad used to practice his golf shots everywhere, and I don't know if he was terribly accurate or whether he was aiming out into the paddock, but Ross, you're going to be finding golf balls for the rest of your life. And now just a few photos I found while I was checking the photo albums. This is the briquette loader that Dad made, the elevator that we sold in the last episode, sat in our front yard for 40 years. This is it at the back of the shop where it was actually used. And here's a picture of the grocery shop in Matoa in the early 1970s, which Dad managed for a few years. And now back to the farmhouse, which was a hub for a lot of family celebrations over the years. Christmases, birthdays, just about every Christmas, family lobbed up. It was very busy. I think that was Christmas lunch one year before the kitchen had been extended. And even, yes, my 21st at the farm with all family. And I just threw this one in because it's a cool piece of computer history. My brother Greg in 1983. And I just threw this one in because it's so not typical of Dad. He was always a goer, always working, always had projects on the go. Maybe that's where I get it from. So this was certainly, I think he was posing. It wasn't a typical shot at all. And, you know, with the memories of the farm are also memories of Dad. They'll certainly be hand in hand for forever in my mind, and most of our family, of course. Rest easy, Dad. So it's the next morning. I've just had my last night in the farmhouse. I pretty safely say forever. I've cleaned out the fridge, left the doors open. That's staying here. All those bits and pieces are staying here. I've picked up everything I need to pack in the van, just about ready to go. For those of you who are wondering what happened to the spider, you can see a leg up the top there. He's gone back behind the NBN box where he's nice and warm, I guess. VHS cleverly mentioned something about him getting off the web or back on the web. Well, he's back on. And yeah, I don't know why he likes sitting behind there. I mean, perhaps with all that EMF radiation right next to the modem, he could mutate, and when Ross comes over here next, he might be the size of a small car. I don't know, and I don't need to find out. So the house is done. Everything's finished. I've packed up the bedding. We're pretty well, I've walked through for the last time, looked in cupboards and things, made sure everything's good. And I just now have to go and turn the gas off. The stove's gone out, so it's made its last cuppa, certainly for me anyway. I have to turn the water off as well. And of course, I think Ross will have the power disconnected. He doesn't need power in here for now. So it's all done. I've just got to close up some doors and throw the last few things in the van and hit the road.